Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of FATCH GT Season 10, Round 4, live exclusively here on TRTN. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here on the first of our 90-minute races this season as we join onto the last 10 minutes of free practice here in Mie Prefecture, Japan. Just momentarily having watched on board there with that of Angelo Petruzzella, now on board with Mario Rutias as we take a tour around the home of the Japanese Grand Prix right here at the Suzuka International Racing Course. Founded in 1962, commissioned for construction by Soichiro Honda and designed by John Hugenholtz in its modern configuration, introduced in 2003, this circuit is 18 turns and 3.6 miles of FIA Grade 1. Home of the Japanese Grand Prix then in Formula 1, and spent the majority of its early life clashing heads with another iconic Japanese track, the Fuji Speedway. It secured the permanent rights to the Japanese Grand Prix in 2009, only skipping out on 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID-19 lockdowns. Other than Formula 1, the FIM Endurance World Championship hosts rounds here and has done so since 1978. The Intercontinental GT Challenge has competed here under the veil of the Suzuka 1000 since the early 1970s, in almost as far back as the mid-1960s there, with some records as far back as 1966 as its oldest race still in current circulation. And outside of the sort of intercontinental and international veil of competition here at Suzuka, it is a cornerstone piece of local championships here for both the Super GT and Super Formula Series, formerly in the case of Super GT, formerly the Japanese GT Championship. What a fantastic series, though, that is as well. But it'll be home today for round 4 of the championship here in Season 10 of FATCH GT. And as I mentioned, we're on to the first of our 90-minute races today. So 1.5 times the current points yield up for grabs here as we make our way into the first quote-unquote Enduro round of the season here. Currently on board then with Mario Rutias, but to get ourselves caught up with where things have been over the first 3 rounds of the championship, reeling away from wet and wild action at the Red Bull Ring earlier last week, we find ourselves now staring down the sights of what has been the second victory in a row then for Gianluca Candarella. Back-to-back prowess then by the Ferrari. We just saw in the background there, I believe, yes, that was Jan Villenbos just ran out wide. As we got onto the discussions there, Candarella still at this point in the championship goes uncontested after taking the mantle away from Melvin Milliston ahead of his inaugural win of the season at the season premiere in Silverstone 2 weeks ago. Actually, 3 weeks ago, technically now. Taking a look as to where that concerns the championship standings as we stay on board here with the number 315 down through to turn 10 and 11. It's Gianluca Candarella to lead by 18 points up and ahead of his fellow Ferrari Giovanni Tula, who makes second place. He finds himself 12 points up the road ahead of Francesco Panabianco, who once again, for the third round running, maintains his stead of third place. Daniel Hatton and Patrick Leger make a joint fourth with 67 points apiece to round out the top 5. Behind them, Will Friedman shoots up to 6th place with 64 points to his name. We see Niels Basler for 7th place with 61 points, only 3 off of Friedman. Behind him, Eric Stander in 8th, Ian McGowan in 9th, and Matthew Williams joins the top 10, now 10th place with 47 points. So taking a look into the session at large here, and also on a scope in towards the regulations in just a moment's time, we are met with 3 Ferraris at the forefront of action, Tula, Homoki and Petruzzella, all 3 of which separated by less than a tenth of a second, I should say. Not too far behind him here, Ford's challenger Chris Harris makes less than 2/10 away from the lead of this free practice session. So getting a look into the regulations for round 4 of the championship. Of course, as mentioned, we're into 90 minutes of racing, but everything stays roughly the same. We still had upwards of 50 minutes before we went broadcasting today here of free practice. We're in for the final 10 minutes to make overall a 60-minute session. We're on to qualifying around the corner from now. 15 minutes of quali set to set the grid here for round 4, which will be 90 minutes of racing once again, and this is as far as we understand for the time being, still with a single mandatory pit stop for fuel, a 25-second fixed window. Taking a look then back into the session, we just saw there as we rejoined, Daniel Homoki goes fastest, a 2 minutes .005. I have it on good authority to see that we'll be into the 159s by the time we get to the end of this session. I would even say we could be seeing it into the a possible low 159s, maybe even a 158 at a push on the run into qualifying. Right now, conditions on track are only labelled as fast, so we're not in optimum conditions. It's a little bit slipperier than the drivers are normally used to when hot lapping. So for the Ferraris here, cars that do prize themselves on maneuverability, that could come up to be somewhat of an issue, as we see there, out through turn 7 at Dunlop. Big trouble then for Daniel Homoki amidst taking the fastest lap of free practice so far. Giovanni Ciulla is on his way down through 130R, the iconic stage by which we saw one of the greatest overtakes in Formula 1 history, Fernando Alonso versus Michael Schumacher. Up and around the outside, that was. Into the pit lane goes Ciulla. We just saw recently as well, up to third there, Francesco Panebianco with Mercedes AMG. It's now also worth pointing out for Homoki, he opened what was a 3-car gap within 1/10 of a second, up to only 2/10 to the nearest car, with Ciulla down in second. Very close, though, from the point of view of second, third, and fourth. Getting a look into balance of performance listings just before we get to the end of free practice today would show BMW looks likely to have the most advantage on track, but it's also worth pointing out that a lot of the cars here really don't seem all too affected under BOP. We saw the same story to be the case over in last round's running at the Red Bull Ring. Taking a look into it, though, BMW with 5 kilos off Lamborghini with 3 kilos, and that's the same story for Ford, who now have themselves a restrictor once again, 19% engine restrictor on, so that's 81% total output as opposed to 100%. That gives them down closer to about 440 horsepower from our listings at the moment, as we see here with Giovanni Ciulla. Getting onto the topic of Ferrari in just a moment's time, but before that, Aston Martin gaining a single kilo in this round. Mercedes on double figures there, 10 kilos on for the AMG, but that's not stopped Panebianco from being in the top 5 already. We see McLaren gaining 11 kilos. Ferrari on your screens at the moment, courtesy of the current generation 296, has 13 kilos on, but it's Porsche to be at the real short end of the stick with 14 kilos on for round 4 of the championship. We do have a few new drivers to discuss here in this round, if I'm not mistaken. Getting a look down towards the trailing end of the listings here, as we do actually see now, better late than never was the case, and we were going to bring this up if we didn't see him sooner, was a case that Gianluca Candarella was, up until the last couple of minutes here, a no-show in this session. It did leave a bit of a chill in the spine here that we could very well be seeing a round without the number 828, given his dominant streak in the last fortnight of racing that's given him wins across round 2 and round 3. So rain or shine has been this man's forte so far, but can he take on the mighty Suzuka International Racing Course is the real question. We'll come to find that out over the course of today as he continues to lead the championship by 18 points. Now, trying to locate some of our new drivers. We did see them on the run-in towards today's session in the pre-race practice lobbies, but come to think of it here, looking through, I am struggling to see if any of them are here. So sadly, we might go without them today. But of the drivers we did see on the run-in towards this round, we did see at least a limited appearance from Alan Surridge and Emmanuel Zampa, who have both recently signed up to the championship. But as it would appear... Oh no, we do have Surridge, so Surridge is here. And I'm still trying to locate, as we speak, the whereabouts of Emmanuel Zampa. But I'm sad to say I can't really see the Ferrari in question. As it would appear, we may very well have to wait another round before we get to see him. But we do get to see the first drive of the season here for Alan Surridge in the number 92 Porsche. But as we mentioned under BOP discussions there, it's going to be a tough day for Porsche. They find themselves on the short end of things. They're the heaviest in class. But we've seen Porsche do magic here in Suzuka before. So I have no doubts in my mind. Oh, my goodness there. Maybe I had to speak a little bit later on, but... yeah, I think that's commentator's curse first and foremost, ladies and gents. Taking a look in here with Levi Warner. Down through the very same section here. So we'll wait until we get into the talks of qualifying before we can get a full tour of the track. As we crawl into the last minute of free practice today. Homoki fastest, Ciulla second, Panebianco third, but there is that imminent shockwave coming from Candarella in qualifying. We also see having yet to have put times on the charts, possibly. I was trying to put perhaps and possibly in the same sentence there. That just did not work out. Perhaps a late join to the session as well has been the case for both Surridge and, as we see here, the 98 of Catherine Lane. New livery for the Lamborghini as she makes her way down through to Spoon Curve. Turns 13 and 14 here at Suzuka. We also see Will Friedman is back with us again. We see Gav Cherry-Moore in the number 186 Mercedes. We did see him in the background a few times here, and now we can get a clear look at the Mercedes for this round. Signed up for the start of the season, though, believe this might very well be our first time seeing him here in Season 10. He makes his way out through the Casio triangle. Down towards the line then at the end of free practice for the number 186 Mercedes. Across the line he goes. As things stand there, no time set at the end of free practice, so waiting until we get into qualifying before we can have anything to speak of on Cherry Moore's qualifying performance. Or pace for that matter. That's all completely up in the aether. We see down to the line here Levi Warner. So coming up around the corner, as mentioned before, 15 minutes of qualifying. He finds himself a single hundredth ahead of Williams as he crosses the line there. Does go up a position ahead now of Kieran Nagolski to 8th place. You can see just how close things were getting towards the end of free practice there when you have the talks of 8 cars within a second of the fastest lap. You can see some of them are getting claustrophobically close. I mean, such as the case there, we see 55 thousandths between Petruzella and Harris at the back of that top 5. And even outside of the discussions of those drivers within a second, there's still some very close gaps to be found here. Nagolski and Williams, as we see there towards the back of the top 10, find themselves separate. Having a glance at it, 41 thousandths between the pair. And the number 67 and the number 923. Now, a few more drivers down to the line as we speak. Among them was the number 100, Jan Willem Boss, into the pit lanes there, 14 for the end of this session. We see following him in, I believe that was, yes, the 828 of Gianluca Candarella. Two-time race winner in this series, currently leads the championship then on for what could very well come to be further down the line his charge to a potential first championship here in FATCH GT. Getting a look back through the last couple of champions in this series. Of course, Levi Warner was your most recent champion, now returning to his championship winning Ford after playing as Joker earlier in the season. As we get into the talks here of qualifying. 15 minutes underway and a very brisk start there from the rest of the field. Eric Stander first among the fray as he makes his way out behind him, Panabianco. But continuing on that conversation of the previous champions, of course, Levi Warner was your most recent champion of the series. David Silf picked up on a single championship in Season 8. Same story for Wilson Gige back in Season 4. Other than that, it's been multiple-time champions throughout. Matthew Williams, 3 in a row from Season 5 to 7. Niels Bastier for the first 2 of the series' existence there. Levi Warner now a 2-time champion after his second, recently gone then in Season 9. We could very well be seeing then on for a pattern of another breakout championship win, but a little too early in the season to conclusively draw those into question. Sadly then, again, with no qualifying predictions to go off of, we're in the blind here, but it's worth keeping an eye out for the drivers that comprised the top 8 earlier on in free practice. If we go and catch on board here with the number 12 leading that charge. Hesitantly so, getting on board here with Eric Stander. He does run out wide there, down at the hairpin at turn 11. Letting a whole sleuth of drivers through there, dropping in behind Daniel Homoki. So we now go to catch on board, having to scroll around the field again here, on board with what is now the leading car of this session, that being Francesco Panabianco. Now, to keep everyone who's just joined us now for qualifying in the loop of what the results of free practice were looking like, and this also gives us a clear understanding of who to watch out for there, was your top 8 cars within a second of one another. So Homoki, Chula, Panabianco, Petruzella, Harris, Leger, Stander and Warner to keep a close eye on over the course of this qualifying session. But it is absolutely worth pointing out Friedman and Candarella having been late joins to the session here. So on board with Francesco Panabianco with Mercedes AMG for our unofficial track tour then of the Suzuka International Racing course. Down through the Casio triangle to the line. So beginning his flying lap on the run down towards the first turn, ironically named given that this comprises turns 1 and 2 in this double apex open hairpin right. Slows him down there for the run round turn 2. Now into turn 3 as we begin the S's. The S curves here that comprise the East course. That was part of the NASCAR Thunder Special in the mid-1990s. Up and around turn looking here, turn 6, now up towards turn 7 at the Dunlop curve. That's where we saw some trouble earlier on for Daniel Homoki in free practice. And we see with track conditions still not entirely optimal, it is providing quite a great deal of understeer as they begin the ascent up and around turn 7. Now to the Degner curves here at turn 8 and 9. Very difficult duo of corners here to master. Whether it's in the open wheelers of Super Formula and Formula 1 or the closed wheelers here of GT3, GT300 or GT500. Down through the hairpin here at turn 11. Up and around turn 12, you can see the alternate layout there just peeking through on the right-hand side. The little breaker chicane there that sadly we'll not be using for today. That could have been a major action spot for the drivers. Down through to Spoon Curve, turn 13 and 14. And this is the prelude run to arguably the most iconic feature of the Suzuka International Racing course. Of course, this is certainly one among them, as it gives the drivers this sort of loop up and then down through past what is their equivalent of a national paddock. On the run down towards 130R. The drivers will be trying to keep this one as close to flat out as they can, but the GT3s are machines limited by the technology of their time, so they do have to lift quite a fair deal on the run down towards the Casio Triangle. Down at turns 16, 17 and 18, it's looked very fast so far here for Francesco Panebianco in the number 667 Mercedes. Down to the line he goes as our benchmark time here for round 4 qualifying. On his trails there, being the number 20 of Angelo Petruzzella. Panebianco to the line. Petruzzella off by 3 tenths. We see in the background there approaching the line was Warner. In front of him there, I believe, was that of Williams. Yes, that is the case there. Williams did not set a time, but Warner did up to fastest. And we see Ken Thomas and Jensen de Gaulle join the fray. And we also see into the fray as well Giovanni Chula now up to fastest by 195 thousandths. Now, again, as with every qualifying session we've covered so far in Season 10, these times are just going to roll in like thunder, so get ready for it. Patrick Leger in 3rd place now as he crosses the line. That forces Panebianco down to 4th. Meanwhile, we also saw the arrival there to the top 10 of Ian McGowan, currently 9th in the session. Looked like a bit of a fluke of a time there, as he does find himself nearly 1.8 seconds off the mark. And you see, this is definitely confounded issues he's found with stability with McLaren over the course of the session. You can see struggling there to get some rotation in on the car on his run around turn 6, now through turn 7 at Dunlop. Gav Cherry-Moore now 10th, Catherine Lane in 11th. Nearest to the line, we have a whole new sleuth of cars. I believe one among them there was Will Friedman. Yes, across the line he goes. The number 208, second fastest. Also across the line in front of him there was Daniel Hatton to 8th, as we just saw a driver there stranded out turn 1, so it appeared. Niels Basler 8th in the session so far. Jan Wieland Boss momentarily 7th, now 8th as Gianluca Candarella joins the fray. Now some 8 tenths up over Giovanni Chula, who himself is only 0.02 of a second away from Will Friedman and what was the former front of the field there between Ford and Ferrari. The 828 looking to make this a possible hat-trick of race wins in the first half of Season 10. Candarella once again on flying form. Nearest to the line, number 667, so back on board with Panebianco. Behind him is Petruzzella there, 6th and 7th in the session as they cross the line. Now up to 2nd, there goes Panebianco. Petruzzella across the line stays in 7th place. Levi Warner coming to the line there. Across the line goes 2nd place. From behind him, we saw Daniel Homoki across the line there, 2nd fastest now. So very heavy contention there from the top 3 in the last couple of seconds just gone. We see between Homoki and Warner is the scope of about 12 thousandths of a second, so very, very thin margins between Ford and Ferrari at the top end of performance. Patrick Leger joins the conversation once again there, now up and ahead of Mercedes is Francesco Panebianco. BMW up to 4th place. Giovanni Chula stays 6th in the session. Friedman 7th, Basler 8th, Petruzzella 9th, and Boss in 10th. Number 184 across the line a moment ago, and also following on his trails, the number 60. Crossed the line just a moment ago there as well. That was for Sander Verstappen. We see Catherine Lane from behind there in the 98, 18th in the session thus far. Number 55 approaching the lines. We see here for Daniel Hatton. Can he break back in to the top 10? Across the line he goes. Yes, he can. From behind him, I believe that is the BMW of, and I just want to make sure I'm getting this correct here. Yes, the number 4. So that's Kokamilakis. Currently yet to have put a time on the charts. That does make a sizable majority of the grid that are still left to put times on charts here. 7.5 minutes left to go here in qualifying. As things stand then, Candarella 159.592. I still have it on good authority. If he pushes just that little bit harder, we could very well see a very, very high 158 in this session. If any driver's going to have the performance on qualifying, I'd say it's a pretty safe choice to assume the 828, given his track record here in Season 10 so far. Homoki in 2nd. Ferrari currently on a 1-2 here in Japan. Warner with a third place time at the moment, as we mentioned there, is only 12 thousandths off of Homoki, so this is a razor-thin talk for the last of the front row positions, and really, when you get into the grand scheme, it's not too far off a stab of pole position itself. Across the line goes Warner, but stays in third place. From behind him, though, Stander to fourth. BMW now holding fourth and fifth place, marking the second and third rows of this grid. That's quickly interrupted because entering the conversation is Giovanni Ciulla by 63 thousandths away from the fastest time. So once again, between the two inseparable Italians at the front of the field, they led in a rolling formation over in Misano not too long ago. And Candarella and Ciulla, the dynamic duo of this grid, now mark again the two leading positions in qualifying. 6 minutes left to go. Can there be challenged by Homoki, Warner, Stander and Leger? Certainly a question to be raised here. I wouldn't count out, though, the chances here for Panebianco or Friedman. Speaking of, we do just see here Will Friedman making his way down through the Casio triangle. Behind him there, we caught a brief glimpse of the Ferrari of Mario Rutias. Down to the line from 8th place. We see in the background as well the number looking here, 323. Friedman stays in 8th place. Just having seen across the line a moment ago there, Janvil and Boss back to the top 10. 10th place there for the number 100. That's Nagolski down to 11th. Nearest to the line on a valid lap. So this is taking off of the markers on the map that currently show up grey, meaning they are on a valid flyer. This is Hans Hussen, who we saw earlier in the season have a great fight with Catherine Lane towards the end of what I think it was the season opener at Silverstone. It was a brilliant way to kick off the season here for the 77. Now on his 4th round here in season 10, marks 18th of the field. And as things would stand there, only just actually shy there of 0.2 of a second away from Jensen de Gaulle in 17th place. Tucked up right behind him, though, there, I believe. I believe that is Ciulla. Is that just? It is Giovanni Ciulla on his way down through the run of turn 18. It pulls it into one side. Now, it is worth pointing out again, Candarella on a new fastest flying lap here with 4.5 minutes left to go. And as we suspected, we are not too far off the shout of a 158 in this session. 159.052. It is 53 thousandths of a second, technically, to get us into that mark. At this time, we see he's not wasting any time at all there. Blasting out the gates here in Suzuka, down through to turn 1. Holds the mark of pole position up over Ciulla's head by 0.6 of a second. He himself only 0.09 away from his fellow Ferrari at the back of the top 3 at the moment of what comprises a Ferrari 1, 2, 3 in quali with Daniel Homoki in the 444. Swarm of cars down towards the line there. The 98, the 44, the 55, the number 4, the number 208 among them. Looking on here in the trailing end of things, Korkamalakis and Friedman. Friedman up to 7th. Behind him is Rutias. Nearest to the line, the number 97s. We try to look on board to find here. Daniel Duda with Ford Performance down through to turn 18. Behind him, the number, I believe, 36 there on the charts. That being Nick Bright. 77 approaching the line not too long ago. Duda to 24th. Hans Hussen coming to the line in front of him there. I believe, yes, is our new driver to the field. It was a bit of a late entry here for Emmanuel Zampa, but he is onto the field. Getting a look in here with the 59. So we did mention before, he was one of the new drivers to sign up for this, and I think it was same in the story of Candarella, where it was a bit of a late entry in, but he is into the session nonetheless, and we see here currently 30th on the field. Now, it is worth pointing out, plenty of drivers still with no time set. Andre Sika, John Williams, Mario Rutias, Sulev Ladva, and Alan Surridge among them. Levi Warner in the time since, now taking up the helm of 2nd place, interrupting what could have been a Ferrari 1, 2, 3, or at a very decent push of things could have been a Ferrari 1, 2, 3, 4. You see they're stopped on the side of the road, Balint Baloff with BMW down at the S's. Nearest to the line here, rebuttal on the horizon for Giovanni Ciulla. Followed in tow there by Ford and McLaren to the line. Behind him then, in 15th place. Now 15th place here, Kieran Nagolski, but we also just saw there a leap up for one of the Fords on today's grid, that being Chris Harris, now 6th in the session. McGowan takes it back. Now back into the top 10 here for McLaren's Ian McGowan. Missed out on last round, so drops down the order quite a fair deal there in the championship standings. But again, bringing back up the discussion of the calendar, we are still just part of the way through. We're on that bridging point to the halfway here, so there's still plenty of time for him to make that back up before the season wraps up. Number 55 nearest to the line then, so we go to catch on board with Daniel Hatton, a driver who's visited the top 10 over the course of this qualifying session as he crosses in to the last couple of minutes here. The last minute actually drawing up as we speak. This will be his last attempt to break back into that top 10 across the line. Stays 14th in the session in the number 55. Behind him, the 77 and the 36 across the line a moment ago. That was for Hooson and Bright, 20th and 19th. And behind them there we see is Emmanuel Zampa. Still on his inaugural drive to the season there, now down to 31st, but this is much of a sort of baby steps session here for the 59. It's sort of working out the lay of the land, having joined up to the grid here for round 4 of the championship. Looking back up then to the scope of things inside of that top 5, Giovanni Chula is not far from the line here, but as it would appear, he's likely to be beaten by the bell. Runs out wide at 130R. He's got 20 seconds. Oh, in the background there, a huge wipeout for the number 67. That was Kieran Nagolski, and a huge tumble down through 130R. The McLaren front end did nothing, back end went lively, and the car pirouetted off into the gravel there. That's a bitter end to the session for Nagolski. Denied his chances of the top 15 in dramatic fashion there for McLaren. Meanwhile, across the line here, Giovanni Chula did manage to beat the bell, has one more lap to play with here. Can he strike up at Warner for a chance of second place? As things would stand, Candarella is still aiming at the impossible here. This is the moonshot for the for the 828. Aiming for the stars this time around. 158 on the charts possibly here in Suzuka. Benny Driver was up to the task. You could bet your bottom dollar it could be the 828. Meanwhile, Eric Stander on a remarkable end to qualifying there. Marks 3rd up and ahead of Giovanni Chula, but it is worth pointing out he is still out on track, so there is a chance for another piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, also out on track at the moment, Matthew Williams, 3-time champion this series. We see in the background behind him, heading down through the 130R with Sander Verstecke. We also see out on track is Francesco Panebianco. Williams calls it quits there at the best of times, looking at 8th place. Panebianco just crosses out through the run of things at the Spoon Curve, down towards 130R. Ending the session there not long ago was Jan Willem Bos as well for 13th here in qualifying. Nearest to the line, the number 60. Oh, what happened there for... Was that a disconnect? No, it was just a bit of a stutter for Panebianco. Okay, a bit of a fright there. Giovanni Chula still out on track. We see here for Candarella. This is the moonshot for the 828. Can he do it? Down through turn 18. 159.052 to beat here. We had it on the charts for a high 158. Across the line he goes, and he does it there. 158.687, I should say, from Gianluca Candarella. If you thought the limit was found, guess again. What a lap there from the number 828. Commanding the field to the end of that qualifying session. Candarella on an all-encompassing pole position ahead of Warner and Stander. 3 different manufacturers there on the podium start. Warner 2nd for Ford, Stander for 3rd with BMW, Candarella on pole once again for Ferrari. His fellow Ferraris there comprising 4th, 5th and 6th. They hold 4 positions of the top 10, marking out 40% of the first 10 vehicles to cross the line for the start of today's race. Well, at the end of qualifying, sadly with no news to discuss this time around, we wait for the grid to form up here. Some major takeaways from today's session. Then, of course, that knockout time by Candarella we finally hit the 158 mark. That glass ceiling was shattered by the 828 Ferrari. Levi Warner came home with a great qualifying session today. That number one, two-time champion, of course, on his championship defense here for Season 10, makes second on the field and finds himself a fairly confident distance up and ahead of his fellow front-engine juggernaut, the BMW M4 number 12 of Eric Stander, who makes third place and a knockout decision there at the end of this quali session, puts himself only narrowly ahead of Giovanni Ciulla, a driver much more accustomed to starting from the front of the field, now marks the back of the second row. We'll get a full rundown of the grid in just a moment's time. Things are hotting up here in Suzuka. Now, to remind you of the regulations at play here, 90 minutes of racing to follow. And as far as we know, a single mandatory pit stop, though it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was two. We'll get a full confirmation on that as we join up with the grid in a moment's time here. 1.5 times the current points yield up for grabs, so extra points available for drivers today here. So they'll be gunning more so than ever here on these sort of banker rounds to get higher up in the order. It's not a competition now for many of these drivers to, oh, can I stay in the top 10? It's, I need to get to that top 5. This is where the money's at now. It's a sort of ladder match style thing we've got now for this grid. And on a grid as airtight as this one, this is going to be quite a riot of a race. Mark my words upon that one. Home of the Japanese Grand Prix and now home of Round 4's grid. So then waiting for the grids to form up. There were some concerns surrounding Panabianco at the end of that session. There was that little stutter there that we mistook for a disconnect. Hopefully nothing finds it in his way towards this race today here. The last thing we'd want is any more connection troubles, given how last week panned out here on TRTN. There was a few issues here and there, and especially in the week before that. Taking a look then onto the grid here for round 4 of Season 10 of FATCH GT here in Suzuka. It's Gianluca Candarella on pole position alongside last season's champion Levi Warner, who starts second place in his championship-winning Ford Mustang. Starting from third then, Eric Stander with a great knockout time at the end of qualifying to put himself up and ahead of Giovanni Ciulla, who now marks the back of the second row. On the third row then, Daniel Homoki and Angelo Petruzzella. On the fourth row, Will Friedman and Matthew Williams. On the fifth row, to round out that top 10, Francesco Panabianco for 9th and Ian McGowan in 10th place with McLaren. Chris Harris in 11th and Patrick Leger rounds out the 6th row from 12th place. On the 7th row behind is Jan Villenbos and Niels Basler. 8th row behind them, Daniel Hatton and Kieran Nagolski. Then on to the 9th row, and that's Ken Thomas and Jensen de Gaulle in 17th and 18th place there, part of a 4 Ferrari pack to round out the top 20 there. On the 10th row behind them is Bas Petersfiem and Sando Verstecher. In behind them on the 11th row, Nick Bright and Hans Houston. On the 12th row, Balint Baloff and Sulev Ladva. Then in 25th place, Antonis Korkamilakis, Gav Cherry-Moore in 26th, then down to the rest of the field. We have Kolmas in 27th, Duda in 28th, Bruce in 29th, Lane in 30th, Surridge in 31st, Zampa in 32nd, Rutias in 33rd, Williams being John Williams in 34th, Andre Sika in 35th, and rounding out the last of this field there with a very late join to the session, the 161 of Tim Alexander Bleich. So he won't have the advantage of having the time in qualifying to put himself higher up on the grid. He starts plumb last here of what is a monstrously large field on the run-in towards the first Enduro of the season. 90 minutes of racing here in Japan. We're only 20 seconds out from getting on board with Gianluca Candarella for the start of the formation lap. Once again on pole position, it seems unstoppable so far, the performance governed by Candarella. There was that spark of hope last week for Giovanni Ciulla, but that was quickly extinguished by the 828, taking absolutely no prisoners in his run at the Red Bull Ring. So on board then with Gianluca Candarella for Ferrari, the 828, to start this field off here for the formation lap here in Suzuka. Engines fired up then for Candarella. He'll be given the green light there to pull away in just a moment's time here. Only a few more seconds to it. We see starting from the pit lane will be Tim Alexander Bleich. He was a late join to the session, was set to start 36th, now starts in the pit lane as we peel away. Rest of the field there taking up behind the 828. Warner and Stander worth keeping a very close eye on there, especially in the case of Warner. On this opening straight, we know already how fast Ford can be, and even under LFM's balance of performance regulations, which is the only one here on console ACC to introduce engine restrictions, it is still a brutally fast machine to go up against. And in the case here of Candarella, even with 19% of that engine restricted off power-wise, getting into the sum of some 440 to 450 horsepower as opposed to the north of 500 produced by the Ferrari, it is still a formidable thing to go up against, and it's the last thing he'll want to see on the run down through to the first curve at turns 1 and 2. Worth keeping an eye out, though, because the car without an engine restriction, but also equally fast, is the BMW M4 in the straightaway. So keep an eye there on the exit of turn 14 out of Spoon in towards 130R, and on the exit of turn 18 at the Casio Triangle on the run down towards turn 1, especially here on this opening lap of the race. When we go racing in a moment's time, definitely a lot to be expected there from the start for Stander. No pressure then for that number 12 starting third in this race. We have news now of another pit lane start. That comes from Alan Surridge in the number 92. That's 2 Porsches from the pit lane here. Not ideal then for Porsche in this race. Of course, weren't looking particularly hopeful in terms of balance of performance. They were really on the short end of it with the heaviest car in class, but now that's been confounded even further with the 92 and the 161 starting at the back of the field. Right now, it appears to be a story of the big 3. Not the big 3 we've normally come to speak of, which has been Ferrari, McLaren, and Ford. Now a new hand takes to the wheel. That being BMW, courtesy of Stander. Looking towards the back of the field here, on board with one of the new drivers on the field. This is Emmanuel Zampa in the number 59 on the exit of the Degners, down in 32nd. As things would stand at the moment, has gained an extra position from Surridge being in the pit lane. He was set to start 31st, and now has got much clearer line of sight on the Lamborghini in front. That's Catherine Lane in the number 98. You see there, zipping on through 2 more Ferraris. Among them, Mario Rutias and John Williams. Down through Spoon, turns 13 and 14. 6:05 a.m. local time here in Mie Prefecture, Japan. In the land of the rising sun, the sun shall rise over this grid today. The run into round 4. We see there the triad of Ferraris, the inseparable Italians of Candarella, Ciulla and Petruzzella, all warming their tyres up for this start here. It's going to be a very vibrant one to be expected from Ferrari, but they've got ample competition today on this grid from Ford and BMW, rearing at their heels to get ready to go for this race as we make our way down through to the Casio Triangle. So then, making our way down towards the line here. 36 cars in all, 34 on track, 2 from the pit lane. That marks 17 cars either side of it on the run down towards the line here. The first 90-minute race of the season here in FATCH GT Season 10, Round 4 of the championship, here at the home of the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Without further ado then, we, on the run down towards the line, are green and racing here in Suzuka after a very long and suspenseful pause. It's a great getaway then from Gianluca Candarella to get up and ahead of Levi Warner, but watch the start there from Eric Stander as he moves up to second place, up and ahead of Warner. A bit of argy-bargy between the pair as they made their way through the first curve. It's Candarella from Stander with Warner down to third. We see Homoki challenging there, Ciulla for control of 4th place as we make our way down through turns 3, 4 and 5. Meanwhile, the yellow flags are out on the trailing end of things here, just obscured from our screens. Has been calamity on this grid, and among the fray we can see caught up there, that is Francesco Parabianco, stranded upon the side of the road. The 667 is back into the pit lane. Could that be his race over in a matter of mere seconds? Back in the green flag conditions here, watching on board with Levi Warner. Having recently lost that second place of the race, he now finds himself down to third, with Giovanni Ciulla biting at his ankles here for a chance of that last of the podium positions. We see Ciulla very nearly stuck his neck out there for the inside at turn 11. We see even more yellow flags kicking off in the time since. The 59 and the 701 now caught up in a spot above us. Sulev Ladva, not the first time he's found himself in trouble. Of course, ran into issues over the course of his time at the Red Bull Ring last week. And now here in Suzuka, it has not been much more comfy of a ride. A disastrous start then for Francesco Panebianco, wiped out of this race in a flash. But for Candarella, it has been exemplary, leading away then by 7/10 of a second ahead of Eric Stander. Levi Warner third, Giovanni Ciulla in a close fourth there. Daniel Homoki in fifth place. Behind him, Will Friedman closing in and closing in fast. But he's not alone, because behind him is Matthew Williams. Then behind looks to be a close fight here towards the back of the top 10 between McGowan, Petruzzella, Harris, Leger, Boss and Nagolski, who also has front end damage. Down through the Casio triangle behind him, Daniel Hatton and Jensen de Gaulle to round out the top 15. Looking in here, Ciulla v Warner is definitely one to watch, because that was one that was very close over the course of that last lap. But he has lost some distance here as the Ford has been able to breathe new life into its lungs there. That 5.4 given some distance down through to turn 1. But it's here in the corners where that Ferrari will once again strike on the Fords. See there, McGowan up the field, but it's actually here the look of things from Nagolski that we want to get a look on board with. As Daniel Hatton now takes up the helm of 13th place off of him. Behind him, Jensen de Gaulle looks to be fighting in a moment's time here with Niels Baslier in the number 23 Ferrari. Behind them looks to be some close fighting at hand here between Ken Thomas, Bas Peter Svim and Antonis Korkamelakis. This is all towards the back of the top 20, mind you. And taking a look as well, as close fighting ensues, Petruzzella versus McGowan at the Degners. We see there a bit of a step out from the car in front. That was Matthew Williams in that bright yellow number 66. We see here from Petruzzella sizing his chances on McGowan for 8th place. Couldn't find anything of it, sadly. He'll be biding his time, though, waiting for the opportunity to arise once again. Meanwhile, another yellow flag out, this time, as it would appear, is the 686 Andre Sika, who I'm told now is now out of this race, marking one of our first DNFs on this grid. In the meantime, we do see here things start to explode in the fight between McGowan and Petruzzella down through the spoon. We also see in the background was the scope of some close fighting in the distance. On the Exeter spoon, this is getting very close now as we catch on board here with the Ferrari of Petruzzella, fighting for 8th place on this grid, up and alongside Ian McGowan on the run down to 130R. There's the chance for a very solid overtake here, but he gets it nailed in before we even hit the corner. That opens the doors up for Chris Harris. Now to come up alongside here, Ian McGowan for the chance of 9th place. We see right behind there is Patrick Leger and Jan Willem Bos in 11th and 12th place on today's grid. Watching with Leger. Formerly a driver for Aston Martin, made that joker play in Misano to move over to BMW. As we see him here now clashing with Chris Harris for the chance of 10th. Down through to turn 1. Bear in mind, there's still the chances here for Chris Harris to advance up to 9th place. McGowan, the back end on that McLaren, looking a bit squirrely on the run through Sector 1. Namely so out through turns 1 and 2 on the start of this lap here on lap 2 of this race. 5 minutes in and already quite a fair deal to discuss. We see, though, what is very close fighting here for Leger. Previously for 10th, may very well have to be reconsidered for 11th with the advance of Jan Willem Bos behind him with the number 100 Mustang. We do see here, just quickly cutting away from Leger's point of view to get on board with the Ford here of Jan Willem Bos. Down to the Degners. He's up and around the outside. A brilliant move there for 11th place by Bos as we make our way in through turn 9. Watching as they make their way down through to Spoon Curve. After that brilliant move of the Degners, Bos holds his ground for 11th place as things stand at the moment. So it's worth catching on board here with recent action from Ciulla and Warner. The last interval showed that things were incredibly close. And now, pardon me, we also see that Warner has now fallen to 4th place. Trouble down in that middle and final has now given rise for Giovanni Ciulla's advance to the podium. Now setting his sights upon the number 12 in front, Eric Stander, who had a brilliant start. We did call this one in advance to keep an eye here for that number 12. The BMW is a very lively car for the race start here in Suzuka, especially as we start on a pretty sizable opening straight for the run down through to turn 1. We do see here Homoki versus Warner for control of 4th place, but he is going to drop a little bit by the wayside here. Even in spite of restrictions, that Ferrari can barely hold a candle over the Fords. We see Will Friedman looking to go up and around the outside here at turn 1, is emerging back onto the track, goes to 161. That was Tim Alexander Bleich, so I'm told here. It's also worth getting a close look in with that of Stander v Tula. This is getting razor thin between the pair, make no mistake of it. Getting a look in, that's the leading 828. We want to get on board with the sister car here, the number 10 of Giovanni Tula. Now sizing up his advance to second. Down through the Degners. But a bit of a wobble there in the second of the two Degners. Kicks away his chances early. If he had stayed the distance he was on the run into this section, he absolutely could have had a chance to leap for the inside here at turn 11. As we round turn 12, though, in a moment's time, he still holds on to third for the time being. It's worth getting a look in as well with some of the other Ferraris. We do see here Ladva versus Verstappen. This is for 29th on the field. We saw early trouble there down at the Degners in the opening laps of this race for Sulev Ladva in the 701. Looking around the field, we also see some action here from Hans Hussen up on the inside there. Guy Spruce went for an overtake, and it led to a bit of a spillover as from behind. It was a case where Mario Rutias collided with Catherine Lane. 4 cars collected there down at turn 10, turn 11, I should say, on the exit of turn 10. It was instigated there on that incident between Bruce and Hussen, and then that collected Rutias and Lane in their midst as well. Not ideal. Looking here with Angelo Petruzella. This is in the talks of a possible fight for 7th place, but we will be catching on board not long from now with some of the other fighting in the top 5, as we do see getting closer and closer to Daniel Homoki is the likes of the 208 of Will Friedman. Speaking of, on board here with Homoki, this is in the fight for 5th place, fighting off Will Friedman for control of the last of the top 5, getting a look up in front as well. We just saw in the foreground, making their way up through the S's, is the fight between the 12 and the 10. They are mere thousandths away from one another now, as things would stand. And getting a look back on board, if we can then, with the number 10 Ferrari, scrolling back through to see the retake then of that 2nd place fight. We saw the last lap's interpretation of the Degners here between Stander and Tula. Now a bit of a different approach as Tula plays more hesitantly through the Degners, hoping for a more aggressive exit, and he does stay course here now by about 0.3 of a second. But will he be close enough to try any of his luck down through to turn 11? Absolutely not. Down through turn 11, stays on the trails here of Stander. Can't find any ground of it yet. The 161, I've just been told, is now out of this race after a yellow flag down at the Degners. That's Tim Alexander Bleich, sadly out of this race as well. It has been a brutal start then in the opening 10 minutes here at Suzuka for the first 90-minute race of the season. And Tula's wasted no time, neither has Stander. It seems in the case of the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. These two had brilliant starts to this race. And now 2 worlds collide for control of 2nd on the run down to 130R. Meanwhile, the number 60 now in trouble as well and is also out of this race. So even more victims onto the list here of DNFs in today's race. Down through to the Casio Triangle. Trying for the more aggressive line there. That's bordering on corner cutting. Fortunately found no advantage on times because of that. Otherwise the stewards would be rubbing their hands together here, waiting to slam him with a 20-second time penalty. Or even a stop-go 30, I believe it would be. Down through to turn 1 and 2. It's worth pointing this out that because of the defense that Stander's put on so far, it has allowed for Warner to continue to close ground here on Tula. Now less than a second away. Up and around the S's. Still watching with one of the furthest fights up the field here for 2nd place. But it is worth pointing out there are plenty of fights to discuss in the long term. The exit of turn 7 here, still watching with the number 10 and the number 12 just to see where things go on the run down to the Degners. This can go nuclear at a moment's notice. Down through to the first of the 2 Degner curves. Right behind them, the number 1, and on his trails, the 444 and Will Friedman in the 208. This is soon to become a 5-car pack here for second place. It's already become a 3-car pack, and we do see the 92 with yellow flags out now down at the Casio Triangle. And that's continued troubles there for Alan Surridge with Porsche. The 92's back in the paddock at the moment. Could we be seeing both Porsches out of this race? Actually, there is still one hope left. That's Ron Colmus in the 666. But we do know at the moment Surridge is back into the pit lane. Still watching here with Chula versus Stander. This is one of the larger fights we see towards the front of the field, but it is worth pointing out there are other fights on display here today. Jan Boss versus Patrick Leger versus Daniel Hatton, one in consideration, much closer now in the case of the fight among the 2 Mustangs for 12th place. We see further up the order, Harris versus McGowan for 9th place on the field. Further down the order, we see De Gaulle versus Thomas versus Basler versus Peter Sveen. For control of what is by proxy 15th place locally, though, is 16th. Then even further down the order, Duda versus Colmus in control of 22nd. That's just a sprinkling of some of the fights we have here on this grid after nearly the scope of 15 minutes of racing. Watching back in, though, with the centerpiece of them all, Chula versus Stander. As now, Levi Warner joins the fray with Ford, and trailing in his midst there, 5th and 6th, Homoki and Friedman. I'm going to try and catch on board if we can here with Levi Warner. He's got front row tickets to the fight for 2nd place in front of him. Moreover, he's also got front row tickets to the fight of 5th place behind him. It's caught between 2 battles at this time, as we do see looking up to go around the outside there is Chula on Stander, but he's squeezed out for the first of the 2 Degners. Now looking for his chances to make things a little bit more lively on the exit of the Degner curves. Does accidentally invite in the number 1. So staying on board here with Levi Warner. As we do see, that was a moment of contact there. And like a Newton's cradle, they bump each other along out of turn 11. That allows for Giovanni Chula to advance up to 2nd, much to the chagrin of Eric Stander, who moves down to 5th place. Falls in there behind Daniel Homoki. Could very well fall out of another position with Will Friedman right on his midst there on the run down through turns 13 and 14 at Spoon Curve. That was a bit of a dodgy one there from the number 1. Did inadvertently create that incident. Well, I say inadvertently, he did create that incident because it was his contact that led to Chula's contact with Stander. But then that's on Chula for staying out, basically, and leaving the number 12 to be swallowed up by the pack in this situation. We see very late on the brakes there was Will Friedman. Looking in here, the battle of the 2 Fords just outside the top 10, as we do see one start to emerge up in front. That's the case of Harris versus, looking here, Harris versus McGowan. It's worth pointing out, though, very close action here for Warner, back on board with the number 1. In what is now his fight for 2nd. Daniel Homoki promoted to 4th place. In and amongst the chaos there of that last lap, there is a high ping warning out for that number 12. So just an advisory there to keep an eye out on Stander. Down through Dunlop then at turn 7. Beginning the run into the middle sector. It's worth pointing out that Homoki's putting a lot more pressure on Warner than Warner's capable of putting pressure on at this time over Chula. It really does seem to be the case here. We're looking less at a fight for 2nd, more of a fight for 3rd. For Warner to hold on to his newfound grasp of the podium, because Daniel Homoki certainly has him for ransom down through sector 2, and I think that's a case here of a difference in machine. The Ferraris are just so agile in that middle sector. It's a night and day difference over the Fords. We do see that start to materialize here in the case of Homoki v Warner, because dropping distance now from Chula is the number 1, so we are looking more so now at the fight of 3rd place. In the pit lane at the moment is Gav Cherry-Moore in the number 186. That's the first of our pit stops in this race, just over 15 minutes in. Bear in mind, that's a 25-second fixed refueling stop for them. So tyres are an optional choice. But I imagine on conditions like these, the drivers will be looking to get the most out of the grip they have. It's a far cry of what they had in the last weeks of racing, the first wet race of the championship at the Red Bull Ring. That was near enough monsoon conditions in Austria. Out through the Casio triangle. And it's a painful stalemate that he finds himself here because he knows he has, at least on paper here, the pace to keep with Chula. But he knows he can't shake off Homoki either, so it's a frustrating standpoint here for Warner, knowing that he can play both sides, but isn't winning necessarily on either, but also isn't losing per se. And it's the same story mirrored there in the fight going on in the background between Stander and Friedman. We just take a look in here with Harris versus Leger, as this is also a fight that has dropped away from its previous position. It was originally the fight for McGowan versus Harris, so it was 9th place that McGowan was trying to hold up and away from Harris. We do have a yellow flag out there for the 315 down at 130R. We, I believe, have quite a sizable wipe out there, and if that's where on track this happened, that's for Rutias. As it would appear, yes, a little bit of damage, but nothing catastrophic, so it appears right now. Oh, well, I say that. He does pitch up and around at the Casio triangle, the rear end. I believe could very well be a case where he's gone very abruptly sideways at 130R, and he's cooked those rear tyres out, and oh, a slam to the wall there for good measure. Well, that's a Rutias, not looking ideal at all. As we go back in on board then with the fighting currently between Harris and Leger, we're back into green flag conditions. We also see in the background is the still continuing fight here, if we go to find on board with them, of Boss versus Hatton. Plenty of fights here in Suzuka. Both of these fights 3 tenths apart then, so that's for control of 10th and 12th respectively. You can see that Patrick Leger giving the lights over to Chris Harris in the 660. Jan Willem Boss versus Daniel Hatton behind as well. Rolls down through 130R. There's a bit of a bump there for the 100. That could give the 55 an opportunity here. Down to the Casio. Backs out of it. Looking up and ahead here with Will Friedman versus Eric Stander. Nothing to be found just yet here, but he has got the line on him. Slowly but surely reeling in that number 12. Meanwhile, Warner's been able to put more distance up over Homoki, so that silences the chances of a fight for third for the time being. Seeing here with Harris and Leger down through to turn 1 and 2. Great run of things so far by Harris. Up and around turn 6. Brilliant camera shot, by the way. We got very lucky with that one. Out through turn 7 at Dunlop. In towards the Degners then. Up in front of him, Ian McGowan. You can see this almost deliberate intent to not try and hit the inside here at the Degners, knowing it does a little too much in terms of upsetting the balance here. Harris has a very good understanding of that vehicle on his run down through to turn 11, but up on the inside goes Leger, and it is a bit of a bump between the pair. There's a bit of a quarter spin emerges for Patrick Leger as he drops now into the fight from behind. Meanwhile, we just quickly catch on board with this one there. Sulev Ladver versus Daniel Duda, as we just scroll across to find Jan Willem Boss and Daniel Hatton, as we see here side by side between Patrick Leger and Jan Willem Boss. Down to turn 13, another knock there. Leger runs out wide. Jan Willem Boss now up to 11th place, but he's got a scorned Patrick Leger. It's contact between himself and Daniel Hatton in the 55. He wipes him out on the rejoin out of turn 14. Get a look at this one here as we stay on board with Jan Willem Boss. That is pure frustration from the number 9. He rejoins the field. I don't think he saw the 55, or it was a case where the 55 maybe didn't see him. Regardless, one force met another. Ultimately, the BMW came out on top in terms of physics, but that's much to the chagrin of Daniel Hatton, who drops way down the order. We see here the aftermath of those damages down out of Spoon Curve. Daniel Hatton elects to stay out, so his damages aren't enough to bring him to the pit lane. He will stay out on track. Looking in here, Petruzella versus Williams. You can see up in front as well as an ongoing fight between Stander and, looking there, Daniel Homoki. Looking in here, this is with Matthew Williams. Currently on his chances to fight what I believe here is 6th place. As we had a bit of a readjust there on the UI. Yes, it is 6th place up for grabs between Williams and his fight with Petruzella. Up in front, Homoki versus Stander for 4th. Warner on 3rd. So we do want to point this out then, that Stander is back on the run here. He's up and ahead of Homoki. Back up to that 2nd row. Nothing as it stands right now in his way between himself and Levi Warner. If we remember correctly, was part of that Newton's Cradle incident down of turn 11. Just in the meantime as well, it's worth pointing out we did have another yellow flag for the 315 Mario Rutias down in Sector 1. That's since cleared itself out, but even more issues finding itself in the way of the 315 today. Williams down through 130R. He starts to put some serious distance here up over Petruzella. Now, in one of these races, you can realistically come to expect, even with 90 minutes of racing to be followed here, if it's a single stop strategy, drivers will still try in a dry race to run it down the middle. So we'll be looking at pit stops in and around 45 minutes into this race here. Roughly. It's not an exact art, but you do see in the pits there. And we saw the front end damage from earlier on a few passing glances for the 36 of Nick Bright. He's now served his mandatory pit stop, is cleared for the rest of this race. And now we do know drivers can. And we've seen it earlier on last week. Was a case where you can more than definitely, if you play your cards right, you knew what kind of car you're driving. You can do it just a little over an hour, even up towards an hour and a half, at a very strong push there of racing on a full tank of fuel. But the car will be heavier than a bank vault. We do see in the background there, big trouble for Petruzella. Caught the gravel on the exit of turn 7, drops now 2.2 seconds behind Matthew Williams. We see Daniel Hatton is now into the pits. We gave it one lap. He wanted to see, really size things up for the scope of what's gone wrong for him so far. Yellow flags are out. It's for Gav Cherry Moore with Mercedes AMG. We do see here, very similar to what we saw not too long ago. Or one of the Ferraris, very same area there. That's caught out Cherry Moore. He rejoins the field for green flags. Nogolski in the pit lane as well on an early stop with McLaren. He drops off his jacks. He's on his way out then in the 720S. We see here from Ian McGowan's point of view, now holds a stable top 10 position. 1.5 seconds up the road from Chris Harris, but it is worth pointing out that gap is slowly withering down here between those two. So that's one to keep an eye on over the course of this event. Eric Stander up and ahead of Daniel Homoki, half a second as it would stand here between the 12 and the 444. With his sights currently set on Levi Warner. After their incident down at turn 11, he's a marked man in the eyes of that number 12, and there could be blood in the water by the end of this race. An hour and 5 minutes left to go here in Suzuka, and what has been so far a very, very solid opening 25 minutes to racing here in the home of the Japanese Grand Prix. Taking a look at the current standing order of things then, just before we get in to the first half hour of racing covered, it's Gianluca Candarella in the lead of this race, up and ahead of Giovanni Chula in second place. Levi Warner makes third, up and ahead of Eric Stander, but it is worth keeping on here with the BMW in his fight now, much closer than before, of the Ferrari of Daniel Homoki. This is for 4th place. We'll stay on board with these two at this time. Further down the order then, we of course see behind is Homoki in 5th place, but Matthew Williams in 6th, Angelo Petruzella in 7th, Ian McGowan in 8th, Chris Harris in 9th, and Jan Villenbos in 10th place. It's worth pointing out, we spoke of that gap earlier on between Harris and McGowan. Just as we quickly pitch away from this fight for 4th, you can see the distance now between Harris in the bright green number 660 Mustang and McGowan in the magenta and purple and black number 64 McLaren. They're still very close to one another. Back on board though with Stander v Homoki for 4th. Looking further down through the order, Leger in 11th, Baslier 12th, John Williams in 13th, Jensen de Gaulle in 14th, and then Ken Thomas rounds out the top 15. Bas Petersveen in 16th, Antonis Korkemelakis in 17th, Roel Kolmos in 18th, Catherine Lane 19th, and Sulev Ladva in 20th place. Hans Husen in 21st, and Daniel Duda in 22nd. Then we have the drivers who have taken the first of their pit stops, and that includes Nagolski, Hatton, Bright, Bruce, Rutiers, Cherrymore, and Zampa, for what is now only 39 cars left on, not 39, 29 cars left on this grid from what was previously north of 30. It has been a brutal start here in Suzuka on the first Enduro of the season. It has already claimed many a driver. Meanwhile, we now see up and ahead of McGowan is Harris, having secured his move in there just on the exit of 130R, just before we got to the Casio Triangle, which we caught on with them then. Moki still less than 4 tenths away from Eric Stander as things currently hold. In terms of the nearest fights on track at the moment, this is certainly one among them. We did also make note as well of the fight between Harris and McGowan, but that's quickly distanced itself since Harris's overtake. And the last interval recorded 6 tenths of a second, nearly 7. It's 6.5 to be more precise between the pair at this time. So as it stands, the closest fight right now is Homoki versus Stander, and it looks to get a great heap closer with a bit of trouble there down through the Degners between BMW and Ferrari, both of them skipping over the track limits there on the exit. Following in their midst is Matthew Williams, who, if these two get into a bit of a prang here, could collect on 2 positions for the price of 1 and an easy top 5. Also worth noting out an approaching fight here, Lane versus Ladva. Looking in here with the Lamborghini, Catherine Lane fighting against Sulev Ladva, who's approaching from behind in the 701 McLaren. Of course, we saw last week to be somewhat of a series of troubles here for Ladva, and today's been no different, but he's picked up the pieces very quickly, and he's sort of the kind of driver where he gets knocked down and gets back up very, very quickly. The bounce back here from Ladva is remarkable. Homoki versus Stander just quickly back on with another report from these two as they get razor thin on the run down through 130R. The Ferrari certainly sizing his chances for the Casio Triangle, but can't find any space of it there. Very late onto the brakes, and holding his ground is Eric Stander for the hold of 4th place. Very, very close stuff indeed there. Also worth pointing out then, back into that fight, Ladva v Lane down through turn 11. Not too far up in front of them there. That's the Porsche number 666 Roel Kolmos as we make our way down through turn 12. That could soon be a 3-car fight for 18th place. As it stands, though, before that point, it was 3 tenths apart between Ladva and Lane for control of 19th on the field. Back on here with the furthest fight up the order, once again with Stander v Homoki. Looking to catch on board here from the defending ankle. Eric Stander with BMW still holding his grounds off for 4th place, up round turn 7. Watching over that rear view as we make our way down to the Degners, watching how close the Ferrari stays with here. Later onto the brakes as we hit the second part of the Degner curves. BMW just having a slightly better exit there. The Ferrari, though, clung to him like a bad habit down through turn 10, now turn 11. The 444 holds the outside, knowing had he committed to the racing line there, he would have bumped the number 12 round turn 11. Now out through turn 12. We'll catch on with them a little later on. Looking in here as we look to see a new fight form up, Leger versus Boss, as it now approaches less than a second away. Up in front, Harris and McGowan are still close by to one another in the fight for 8th place. Seeing here with Homoki's point of view, quickly tabbing in to see 4 tenths of a second between BMW and Ferrari at this time. So we go to try and catch on board here with the Lamborghini and the McLaren at the fighting towards the back of the field. We actually see the car just up in front of him, who is now an active party of this fight, Roel Kolmos, who's now become the 3rd driver involved in this fight for 18th. With the rapidly approaching 98 and 701 on his trails there. That's Catherine Lane and Sulev Ladva. Looking over the rear view here, just hiding underneath the rear wing on our cameras. is the number 98, Catherine Lane, looking for an out here on the run up towards 18th place. You see that she peeked for the inside there, but has she left herself open for an advance here from Sulev Ladva as Roll Colmus runs out wide? We do see the 701 still holds that inside line, but is forced to tuck in behind the Lamborghini. Might have them on the straightaway here on the run down to 130R. We watch in with Colmus as things could go nuclear if they try to go side by side here. They're certainly close enough to go for it. Down through to 130R. Lane ahead of Ladva, but well held between the pair as Lane's up to 18th. Number 77 has a stop-go 30, Hans Hussen, for speeding in the pit lane. Down through turn 18. Ladva had a bit of a stab there as he dropped off of the curbs. That's what kicked the back end loose on the 701. The 98 holding all the way to the right-hand side and collect... What was that there? There's a little bit of debris on track. Was kicked up there from the 98. I don't believe she knew that was there on track. Not that that's going to have much an effect on the drivers, of course. It is just a weightless prop, but curious nonetheless. Meanwhile, 444 in trouble. That, if I'm not mistaken, is for Homoki. Yellow flags are out, so in the time, having last since seen it, down at Spoon Curve, Daniel Homoki in big trouble there in his fight with Eric Stander. Now drops in behind Williams and Petruzzella, and as actually as it stands there, drops out of the top 10, as up in front of him is Jan Villenbos and Patrick Leger. What on earth happened here for Daniel Homoki? Down at turns 13 and 14 for things to get this sour. We knew the fighting was close, and as we see it there, the 444 pirouettes off track and is into the wall. Another major incident down at 130R, and that, I do believe, is the 444 very likely out of this race. Watch this wipeout here from Homoki. The back end doing absolutely nothing to keep him on. Spins around there, clatters the wall. That's the end of the road for Ferrari's 444 car as Homoki resides to the pit lane. Yellow flags cleared then from sector 2 and 3. A bitter end to things there for Homoki. We'll be very curious to know how it all started, as we only caught in the trailing end of things whilst we were watching on with Colmus, Ladva and Lane in their fight down in 18th place. We thought things were just relaxed enough there to take a break from Stander and Homoki, but we were sorely mistaken. Now we see here in the aftermath of it, Matthew Williams versus Eric Stander. We go to try and catch on board here. We do just quickly see the fighting between Lane and Ladva start to boil over there. And this is what's left of that fight for 4th place. Same defender, new attacker, as Matthew Williams peels into frame here, much closer now in that Mustang. This could be quite a scary sight here for Eric Stander. Down through to turn 13, very nearly muscled the 66 out of the line there at turn 13 at Spoon Curve. Down through 14. Behind them, you can see just off in the distance the number 20 of Angelo Petruzzella. So Williams collecting on a top 5 position here. Now sets his sights upon 4th place. They're side by side on the run down through to 130R. Stander around the outside, Williams on the inside. Williams takes the inside, and Stander goes for the more aggressive line on exit. They're very close to one another. They're switching back to the inside, down to the Casio triangle. Eric Stander defends 4th place off of Matthew Williams, and he leaps for it down through the Casio triangle. Oh my goodness, have a look at this move here from Stander to retake 4th place. Very close there, millimeter precise between the 12 and the 66. Very good awareness between both drivers down in sector 3, but that was a little too close for comfort there for Eric Stander, as things have certainly hot up now for his control of 4th place. Looking in here with another BMW on this field, Patrick Leger, and his continued fighting with Jan Villenbos for 7th. These two carving their way up through the field as things stand at the moment, as we cross past the first half hour of racing. We're 35 minutes in to round 4 of the championship and still far from the cease of action here in Suzuka. Heading down to the Degners with a less than ideal run off turn 7. We can see that Williams trying to go up and around the outside, opens the door up there, and through goes Petruzzella. Up 1 position, up to top 5 now for that number 20. Now sets his sights upon Eric Stander. who's done so far so good for his chances to defend away 4th place. We see that Petruzzella is not the kind of person to wait idly by here for positions to fall into his lap. He's a man of action, and he already took their 5th place off of Williams, and that's quite an interesting thing to do when you consider he just had to go toe-to-toe with a 3-time champion in this series for that position. And we see that it is not over for him just yet. Going to look on board then with the scope of things from Ford and that of Matthew Williams. Now the epicenter of action inside of that top 5. Down through 130i. It was a bit of a bump the last time. It's a bump this time as well. And if he can get some distance on it here, we could very well be seeing that fight for 4th place. But right now, his priorities are holding off Petruzzella from trying his luck again. It is worth pointing out we still do have fighting further down the order for the 701 and the 98. We see them down through turn 11. As it was a fight we were watching on with earlier on. They make their way around turn 12 here. Landver still tucked in behind lane, but the two now advance up to 16th and 17th respectively. There's Roll Colmus versus Chris Harris, but it's worth pointing out that Harris has already taken his pit stop, so under strategy, Colmus won't be much closer for much longer. Back on board with Williams. Petruzzella sets his sights then upon 5th place, so he saw that move down through the Degners, and it was a fantastic leap there for that number 20. If we can go and catch on board with him here, looking to try and capture the point of view here of Angelo Petruzzella, as we see him parked on the rear bumper, staring up through the diffuser of that Ford Mustang. Down through to turn 13 and 14. Just as much as this is a condition here for Williams, that if he starts to build up a bit more of a bit of momentum here, he could catch up to the fight for 4th. It's exactly the same story here for Angelo Petruzzella. We can make note of it, though, that he is losing a bit of time out now to the Mustang. We can see it getting further and further away from the point of view of the number 20 out through 130R. Down into the Casio. Of the 3 cars in this fight for by proxy 4th place, he knows he's the one with the most momentum in the corners. He knows he's the most maneuverable. Problem is, though, here on straights like this, he cannot hold a candle up against BMW, neither Ford, given their restrictions in play. Looking here to a possible fight, John Williams versus Niels Baslier. 10th place between the two Ferraris. We'll see, though, what's the going rates as they make their way around turn 18. Neither of them elect to run for the pit lane. We could be seeing those creep up in the next 6 minutes or so on this grid. Trying to cut the toe off away from Williams, though I do want to point out there, he's a little too far away for that to even matter. Looking in here, Ken Thomas versus Jensen de Gaulle. De Gaulle, who I believe originally started the season, yes, with Porsche, has under our nose then played his Joker and moved to Ferrari. If you don't believe us, I mean, have a look at this here. We do have the original graphics when we were setting up the season that showed that he was with Porsche. And I must say, a bit of an odd-looking Porsche, if you ask me. Seeing here with Giovanni Ciulla, who's carved away command of 2nd place. We are looking at another 1-2 here, and that would mark, as things stand, the 3rd 1-2 in a row. A hat-trick of rolling finishes here between Candarella and Ciulla. The dynamic duo, then, of this grid, as mentioned before. Speaking of, here is Gianluca Candarella. Holds the fastest lap so far, 1:59.277. here in the race. As we approach the halfway mark, about 4 minutes away from now. He'll be leading that charge for the run into the pit lane. We'll see what he chooses to do. We already do have some drivers in the pits right now. Among them is Levi Warner, Matthew Williams, and Angelo Petruzella. Into his pit box goes Warner. But I am curious to note there what's going to be happening for Williams and Petruzella from behind. They are all very close to one another there in the paddock. And depending on how quickly they can get their stops done, Petruzella could stand upon a possible overtake on Williams. Looking in here, Baslier v Williams down through, and this is John Williams, I should point out, down through turn 1 and 2 at the first curve. Do seem to remember a time here where I believe it was, I think we had 4 or 5 drivers with the same surname. This was back in, I think, ages ago now. This would have been the first season of the Console Endurance Series. I believe we had John Williams, Matthew Williams, Brandon Williams, Kyle Williams, and Aaron Williams. And what's crazy as well is I'm pretty sure that almost all of them raced for completely different teams. I think this was in Imola. We made a joke about it at the time. It was like they should, you know, maybe get into a team and call themselves Williams. No one's ever done that one before. It was quite an interesting time here. We see for John Williams, though, still fighting with Baslier. Baslier, whose number 23 car has become somewhat of a poster boy car of the season in that black and turquoise. This represents one of the closer fights on the field at the moment. Of course, with strategy still playing a heavy hand, the only other fight in conversation right now, unless we get in with Jensen de Gaulle and Ken Thomas to see if that's gotten any closer, is still, as things would stand there, Lane versus Ladver, and they'll be up a few more positions under strategy at the moment here. Stander is into the pit lane, so McGowan's going to move up to 3rd in this race. Also in the pits at this time, Bas Peters, Freeman, Roll, Colmus. And speaking of a fight we spoke of earlier there, de Gaulle v Thomas, that has now advanced closer to battling territory. But back on board here with Williams versus Baslier. We'll actually go to catch on board with some of the onboard cameras from the cars in the fight today. On board then with John Williams, down through turn 1 and 2. Now moving on to the defending car here, as we see a bit of a wobble out through turn 7 for Niels Baslier. Two-time champion this series in the former number 51, now moves to the number 23 for the rest of the season, so it appears. Down through the Degner as we go. Up into turn 11. You see them emerge there very close to one another now. 0.2 of a second between Williams and Baslier in what is currently the fight for 6th place. As we're only 50 seconds away from the halfway mark of the race, we'll be taking a look back into the standings as we see strategy play out in real time. As far as we know, though, the leading Ferrari has still yet to come in, so the 828 still leads that charge. You do see things get razor thin now in the conversation between Baslier and Williams. Down through to the Casio triangle. We see, though, running very deep onto the brakes there to try and hold off an advance from the 923. Niels Baslier leaves himself open, so he dives for the pit lane before any further damage can be done there in the 23. And just dead on the halfway mark, so very well timed from the two as they come back to the pit lane here. I want to point out there was a yellow flag out for the 315. That was Routiers in trouble.
We see with a whole new slew of drivers in the pit lane. Among them now recently joining is Kokemelakis. From Warner's point of view, he's up a plenty few positions. They're back into the top 10. So begins his charge back to the top 5, even to be within a chance of a podium by the end of this race. It has been a very tough one so far for him, but brilliant racing throughout. As we get to the halfway mark of round 4, you can see this great divide forming up with the rest of the field. We see here in the case of Catherine Lane, as Sulev Ladva went into the pits before her. She stays out on track, yet to have come to the pit lanes in the number 98 Lamborghini, down through turn 1 and 2. She's had some great fighting today, and that really does seem to be the running story here of Catherine Lane in this championship. We saw great fighting for her at the start of the season. We saw it, I believe, in Misano as well at round 2 of the championship, and now we've seen it today with Sulev Ladva alongside her in control of what was previously 18th. We'll see what that comes out to be when they rejoin the field. It does look to be the case that they'll be going back into fighting for 18th by the end of this race. We see the dynamic duo, the two leading cars here from Ferrari into the pit lane. Candarella and Chula, the 828 and the number 10, are in. Staying out is Leger and McGowan. Behind them looks to be the case here for a few other drivers. I believe that is across the line, yes, the 77. So that's Hans Hutzen, a driver who has already come to the pits long before. And the number 77 there, 26th, currently fighting with Nick Bright. The two, of course, though, on separate lengths of the track here. We do see the forming of a new fight among the drivers who have come into the pits before our leading pair just a moment ago, and such is the case here for Stander as he's back in, thrust into fighting now against Angelo Petruzzella, with Matthew Williams just up in front of him there in the number 66, down through to the Casio Triangle. It's going to be a busy day here for the next 42.5 minutes for Eric Stander, if the first 47 coming up on were not busy enough. You see here for Eric Stander, Angelo Petruzzella has got him in his iron sights, and if we could try and go and catch on board here with the number 20 just before the scope of any possible moves. It's contact though as we catch them, and Stander and Petruzzella make contact at turn 1 and 2. We try to go and have a glance at this move here. I am curious because of course we were hurrying through to try and find them. We only catch then the second half of it. And I'm still trying to piece together. So I think it was a case Petruzzella tried his way for the inside, but got very, I guess maybe enthusiastic on it would be one word. We simply just don't know the story. We've only got half of the story to tell. Meanwhile, the number 12 is in trouble. Yellow flags out for the number 12. And Eric Stander could very well be out of this race. We also saw the yellow flags come out for that of Gav Cherry Moore. And we see wiped out there at 130R. The Mercedes in turmoil. With 41 minutes left to go, he tries to rejoin the track here. Critical front end damage. Meanwhile, the number 12 is back in following another incident in Sector 1. And that looks to be a bitter end to today's racing for Eric Stander. We saw that was the same story very early on for Francesco Panebianco. And now another driver who was a start of the top 10 for today's race could very well be seeing an early finish, with 40 minutes, just under 41 left to go here in Suzuka. Into the pit lane goes McGowan and Leger from second and third. This reinforces Candarella's arrival back to the lead of this race. Giovanni Chula short to see second place in the number 10. Behind him is Jensen de Gaulle in the number 69. Ken Thomas comes into the pit lane. For Levi Warner then, that's control of third secured, because the only thing standing in his way now would be the number 69, who, as we can see from the UI, still has that orange number 1, meaning he has a pit stop to serve at the moment and has not done so yet. Warner having no such thing, with the green marker signifying he's done all of his mandatory pit stops, has got a clear line of sight on a podium for today's event. Case of Williams, he will be seeing a top 5 as things stand at the moment, especially with trouble from behind between Petruzzella and Stander, forcing open a much larger gap than before for Williams. 2 seconds ahead of Petruzzella at the moment. You can see there the Ferrari slipping and sliding on his run around turn 6, now through turn 7 here at the Dunlop curve. Close fighting at hand here. Harris and Leger versus McGowan. So a three-way split. Harris up and ahead of Leger. McGowan in his sights. We'll go and catch on board here with that Ford. If we can, at least, here. I think we've got to scroll all the way through the Ferrari, so apologies there for any viewers in the audience that this might be a little uncomfortable for. On board here with Harris, looking for the inside off of McGowan. It's a very close lunge for it, but he's got the inside, then out through the apex of turn 11, up and around turn 12. He's been a man on a mission throughout today. Chris Harris looking up for 7th. Side by side with McGowan, but he's just got more momentum to carry in that Mustang. That V8 engine is mighty, even in spite of a 19% restrictor. We have just got wind as well from the pit lane. The 186 of Gav Cherry-Moore, who we saw wiped out at 130R there, has been able to repair his car. He is now out on track, having rejoined the field. The team having patched the car back up. He's back out into this race with 38 minutes left to go. Watching here for Harris v McGowan v Leger, a three-way split for 7th as they roll around the Casio Triangle onto lap 25. Looking to try and catch on board then with the McLaren in the middle here, just so he's got a very good seat in the house. It's Ian McGowan from 8th on the field. He's got Leger parked on his rear bumper. He himself looking to give challenge over to Chris Harris, who recently took 7th place off of him over the course of the last lap. It's a tough split here for McGowan. But he's been able to soldier through that top 10 for the longest time in today's race. There's nothing to say he can't continue to do that. Down through turn 6. Presley then fighting for 7th. You could also make the argument that could quickly switch to being a fight where he defends off for 8th place. It's an interchangeable term at this time, just given how close his contemporaries are to him. It is technically a three-way fight for 7th, so that's where it will stand for us for the time being. 37 minutes left to go here in Japan. It's been, so far, a very solid run of things, albeit one with plenty of brutal footnotes at this time. We see running out wide from turn 11. Harris left the door open on the inside at the hairpin for McGowan, who uses that as his sort of slingshotting point here through turn 12. The same area where Harris was able to get that position up on him not too long ago. Could very well become a staging point here for McGowan's fight back to 7th. Bear in mind, though, one slip, and it's Leger's to take. And he's right behind there in that number 9. On our cameras, they're hiding just underneath the rear wing of that McLaren. We are closely looking at the chances then of that fight spilling over to be a one for 8th place. Back up into that fight for 7th. Late on the brakes for McGowan. Leger follows through with him, so BMW doesn't gain any advantage in the Casio Triangle. Moreover, has a big bump there. We just saw when he rides the line too close on the inside from turn 17 through to turn 18, that's where it all becomes quite a big issue for him, because we end up in this situation where he jumps up over on his right-hand side. There is a bit of a dip there as he drops off of the curbs. Very violent dip because it just goes sudden. And that sudden drop on the car is enough to upset the balance. And he is ever so slightly, I believe, ever so slightly off camber on the run out there from turn 18. This does leave McGowan and Harris alone now for closer control of a fight for 7th. We'll catch on with them a little later on as they make their way out through turn 7. Catherine Lane into the pits there, but I believe may have just overshot her pit box. That's definitely going to add some time onto her pit stop here. The idea is that she gets up and ahead of Ladver by the end of this stop, but with that little kerfuffle in the pit lane, that's definitely going to be an issue for her. A driver who's made a silent procession throughout this race then. Antonis Kokomelakis in the number 4. We see then the aftermath of Eric Stander in his incident with Angelo Petruzzella. Still resides from the pit lane. It's a remorseful moment then from the paddock, watching over the grid he was once part of in this race. That's not the way he was hoping his race day to end. No news yet on De Gaulle's entry to the pit lane. Number 98, Catherine Lane, has a stop-go for speeding in the pit lane, so even if she was able to get up and ahead of Ladva, which it appears to be the case that she hasn't, she just jumps out of the way there to make sure she's not in the way of Petruzzella. It's been a rough turn of events here for Lane. Questions there and remain if she'll see the top 20 by the end of this race. That's not to take away from the fighting that she's had over the course of today's race, but it's still a brutal reminder of how motorsports giveth and motorsports taketh away. Looking up and around the field here to see with one driver who's still yet to make his appearance to the pit lane. This is Jensen De Gaulle, former sign-up for Porsche. As we see there off in the background, Gav Cherry-Moore in more trouble with Mercedes. It's been a very rough day for him here in Suzuka. Has taken that Mercedes to every nook and cranny of this track. We see here with the Ferrari of Giovanni Ciulla, actually, as we trying to get away from the Ferraris here, the enormous amount of them on this grid. Taking a look in with Williams, being Matthew Williams at the moment. 1.8 seconds up over Petruzzella. Now, it's worth pointing out here that that gap is slowly dwindling between the 20 and the 66. So there is the chances, as I say that, running out wide was Petruzzella on turn 13. So might have to hush-hush on that one until later on in this race. 32, just under 33 minutes left to go in this race. Levi Warner now second. And I'm curious to know as to why that is. What happened for the number 10? Where is Giovanni Ciulla? This is actually a great point to make. Where is... Oh, there's been a disconnect. There's been a disconnect for Giovanni Ciulla, who was previously slated to see second place here in Suzuka. After his disconnect, rejoins the field, dropping way down through the order there, outside shortly of the top 10. That is disaster for the number 10. That breaks his streak then of routine appearances to the podium. He's had 2 in a row there of second place finishes. He's finished in what has so far been 2 back-to-back 1-2 finishes alongside the 828 of Gianluca Candarella. The 2 teammates were inseparable in the last 2 runs of this championship, but as it would appear, now may very well be a time for change. Candarella still leads, no questions on that at the moment, but it's Levi Warner to second place. De Gaulle still without an entry to the pits, makes third, but you see close behind them is Williams. Ford looking at a chance then of a double podium. Meanwhile, having a glance back in here, we caught on with them earlier on in the fight of Harris v McGowan v Leger, but we see that that fight is still raging on. So looking to catch on board here. We'll leave you on board with Harris at the lead of this fight as they go down through the Degner curves. We'll be back to you in just a moment's time, or so we might, because we see things get very close here for McGowan on his chances over Harris, down through to turns 10 and 11. Then we'll catch on back with you again in a moment's time as he holds the inside line down at turn 11. It's contact between the pair, but he keeps going. Still on board then with Chris Harris in his fight with Ian McGowan and Patrick Leger. In the time since, though, these three have now upgraded to what is currently the scope of the last of the top fives. And for what reason? It's because Jensen de Gaulle has finally come into the pit lane. Number 69 is in, the last of our pit stops for today's race. And that's bumped up quite a fair few of the order here throughout that top 10. Moreover, it's left the door open here between Williams and Petruzella. No drivers now standing in between the pair of them. It's 1.8 seconds between the Ferrari and the Ford. We see here, though, with Harris v McGowan v Leger, a three-way split here. Ford, McLaren and BMW. What could very well be made an argument for three of the most meta-breaking cars in the last couple of years here on ACC. Three cars that have taken competition by storm. The BMW M4, when it was introduced back in, I believe, 2023, and then the year thereafter, which saw the introduction of the McLaren 720S Evo, driven by Ian McGowan at this time, and the number 64, and then up in front, the 2024 Ford Mustang, which was introduced later on in 2024 to Assetto Corsa Competizione. Still the newest one on the block then, and Ford has not seen things particularly easy under balance of performance regs, often on the short end of the stick, especially so here on LFM regs. Even in spite of losing weight today, that engine penalty is still paying a killer price here to Ford's overall standing on the field. We see there off in the background, that is, I believe, again, Gav Cherry-Moore at 130R. The man simply just cannot catch a break in that Mercedes. We see that having to cut the Casio triangle was Mario Rutias. It gets to the point where you just start to feel quite sorry for him there. That Mercedes is just kicking him off at every corner like an angry horse. I'm not even sure what to say here for Cherry-Moore. You got to respect the man's commitment to keep in this race, but you can see the same corner where he's been wiped out at and had damage very similar to this not too long ago. Is this finally to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Because it does look like his steering system has been compromised quite a fair degree. He's going to be in the pit lane even longer now than he was the last time. Out through turn 6, back on board with Harris, McGowan and Leger. Round turn 7 at Dunlop. Down through the Degners. It's worth pointing out here, McGowan is getting very, very close now. We saw there was a bit of a bump between the pair of them not long ago, so down through to turn 11. Is history likely to repeat itself? Not this time around. You can see that McGowan is getting a lot more confident down in turn 11. He's sizing up alternative lines over the 660. He's looking for wherever the gap might exist, as we know the saying goes. So the last of our pit stops in play here. It is worth taking a look at the standings as we also take a look around a few of the various fights still around on the grid right now, this being possibly the closest among them. As we see, such as the case for Leger, he does drop in behind now, much further behind than before. What has now taken centre stage, the fight of Harris v McGowan for 5th place on track at the moment, out through 130R and into the Casio triangle. So having a look at things at the moment, Gianluca Candarella leads here in Suzuka with 26 minutes left to go before the checkered flag. Levi Warner makes 2nd place with Matthew Williams in 3rd, Angelo Petruzella in 4th, and as you see here on your screens, the fight for 5th place, Chris Harris versus Ian McGowan. Then behind them in 7th place is Patrick Leger, Jan Villenbos in 8th, John Williams in 9th, and Niels Baslier rounds out the top 10. Ken Thomas in 11th, Jensen de Gaulle in 12th place, and then behind them is Daniel Hatton in 13th. Antonis Kokomelakis inside of the top 15 there, 14th. And up and ahead of Nick Bright in 15th. Sulev Ladva in 16th place. Baspi Tasvim in 17th. Roll Colmus in 18th. Gay Spruce 19th. Daniel Duda in 20th. And Catherine Lane in 21st. Hans Hussen in 22nd. Giovanni Chula is back out on track to my knowledge here. The number 10, as we see there out through turn 11, has rejoined the field. But it's a bitter reminder of what happened for him there with that disconnect. He's dropped 21 positions to 23rd now on this field. He's tucked in ahead of Rutias and Zampa, 24th and 25th. Gav Cherry-Moore back in the pit lane there. Multiple laps down because of the damage he's had earlier on in today's race. Now with even more to patch up. Ian McGowan still fighting here with Chris Harris, looking up the inside on the exit of turn 11 this time. getting closer and closer and closer. So we've been watching with the Ford for their angle of the fight for the longest time here, but let's go and catch on board with McGowan. Once again, the man in the middle on this three-way split for 5th. On board with the 64. Bear in mind, tucked in right behind him there is Leger, so it's worth taking note of that. You can see, or barely there in that rear view mirror, because the McLaren only has one for the driver's side. So looking on with the driver's eye view of things, as we see the G-forces in effect on the run around 130R. The McLaren very confident in that section, very late on the brakes though, has to avoid contact with Chris Harris, and Ian McGowan late onto the brakes there, drops in behind Patrick Leger. That could have ended in disaster there. He's gone very, very late on the brakes. I think he was carrying a lot more momentum out of 130R than I thought, I suppose that he thought he'd expect to carry in that section. And that did catch him by surprise when he got down onto the brakes and saw that the car was not slowing down anywhere near as fast as it's done on the last couple of laps there. Tunnel visioned in on that 660, and that's been to his detriment there in that last lap, now dropping down to 7th. You see here, back on with Lane. Previously was in that fight for 18th, now sizing up a top 20 position by the end of this race. We did say that was going to be up in question over whether or not she'll see the top 20. We do see, though, there is the chance for the 98. But now, to put that Lamborghini toe-to-toe with a Ford, it's a difficult matchup here for Lamborghini to come out on top. We'll see, though, if it's the case out through 130R into the Casio Triangle in the fight of Lane v Duda. The only Lamborghini then left on this grid as things stand right now. We saw earlier on in the broadcasts from yesterday with the NLRL Sunday League, we got a bit of a blast from the past when Progenio brought the Reiter REX back to the grid. That's the Lamborghini Gallardo, the ancestor of the Huracan. And now even the Huracan has gone the way of the Gallardo, because both of them have been outmoded by the Temerario, which I'm sure if there was still content updates coming for ACC, we'd have seen by the end of this year. We can still hope for things to change, but I think we already got that word through that there won't be any more major content updates for Assetto Corsa Competizione, as focuses from the developers has now gone over towards other projects of the Assetto Corsa IP, like Assetto Corsa Rally and Assetto Corsa Evo, which most recently saw the addition of the Audi R8 LMS GT4 Evo. It also saw the addition of the Ferrari 296 GT3, and there's a very likely possibility they'll be seeing the Ford Mustang GT3 in the next couple of weeks. Hang on, just a tick here. We're looking at what looks to be another yellow flag, and it's the 186 again. And I mean, that car has to be allergic to 130R. As we see it, actually, you know, this is down at the Casio. So has it been a case where he's run into more trouble down at the Casio than he's had at the 130R? But I'm not 100% sure here. This is the third time he's wiped out in this section of the track. That Mercedes is just simply allergic to that complex down from 130R through to the Casio Triangle. We see here with McGowan, who's sizing up a possible fight back to 6th against Patrick Leger, out through turn 11. Out through turn 12 we go. Out through Spoon at turn 14. Again, it's a frustrating thing for the McLaren because, well, yes, it's no slouch in the straightaways. It's not going to be able to be as competitive on the straights as the BMW, which has no engine restrictions, mind you, or the Ford that does. It's here in the corners where he's able to get some kind of advantage. So in Sector 3, it's slim pickings here for opportunities for him. He'd be praying for Leger to run into the same kind of issues he had in the last couple of laps that gave up his chances of 6th. With the last 20 minutes of racing rolling in here in Suzuka, What has so far been 70 minutes worth of racing here on the first 90-minute race of the season. We enter its final 20 minutes then, the last chapter of round 4 coming up just around the corner. We'll catch on with those three a little later on. We see their lane now ahead of Duda with the Lamborghini. Looking further around the field here to see some other fights. We do see from now the point of view of Patrick Leger. The number 186 has a stop-go 30-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane from... Actually, no, that's from race control. I think he crossed over the exit lines a little too early. The 315 now brings the yellow flags out there. That's for Rutias down at turn 3, I believe that is. Yes, on the start of the S's. We have seen that since fall back into green flag conditions. We're watching on board at the moment with Leger, a driver who started the season off with Aston Martin, played his joker for round 2 of the championship at Misano. And so far, officially is only one of 2 drivers in this entire championship after 4 rounds to have played their joker. The other one being Levi Warner, who moved away from BMW back to his championship winning Ford that he used in last season's bout. You see here for Leger, moved from Aston Martin to BMW. It's a pity we couldn't see the Aston for longer. I'm pretty sure that is the last of the Aston Martins gone then, as Leger moved over towards BMW. Now, bear in mind, the rest of the grid still has that joker to play. Now, they don't have to actually use it. It's worth pointing this out under the regulations. Unlike what the naming would suggest, this isn't something they have to play, I think, over the course of the season. I will double check that with the stewards, but I'm pretty sure that is the case where this is a voluntary addition to it. It's a case where you can swap cars, but you can only do it once. You'll be marked for it, and you cannot go back for the rest of the season. There's no do-overs in that sense. We do see another yellow flag out again, this time for the 315. And now we also see one for the number 10. That's Giovanni Chula on the exit of the Degners. Down through to turn 11 and... 10 and 11 there on the exit of turn 9 as he falls in behind Sulev Ladva. You see there running out wide, that was McGowan. The question is McGowan going to be able to hold on? Yes, he is. He's still facing the right way, but he's lost a lot of ground there off of Leger. So that now isolates this fight off between Harris and Leger. No third-party involvement this time around. This is going to be for 5th place between the two, as this has been the motivating factor for Leger to start pushing now for 5th place. Down through to the Casio triangle, we could start to see this almost worried drive emerge out of Chris Harris. He is covering off the inside a lot more now, knowing that the BMW is closing ground at a rapid rate of knots. We close in on the last 15 minutes of racing here, the last quarter hour of racing to follow here at round 4 of the championship. Now, these do represent vital positions on the grid between Leger and Harris. This is the breaking point into that top 5. And as things stand at the moment, with 1.5 times the points yield, to be in that top 5 was already impressive in a normal race, but in this one, it's payday. This could definitely help Harris to advance up through the field in the talks of the top 10. Harris, having made his debut to this championship last round at the Red Bull Ring, is now looking at the scope of his first top 5, with his last round's performance yielding a finish And having a look here, 9th place at the Red Bull Ring, awarding him 22 points. We'll catch on with these two a little later on to take a look at this standing order once again, as things are getting closer in the topic of 2nd place here. Matthew Williams versus Levi Warner. This is 5 championships head-to-head here. 3-time champion in the 66, 2-time champion in the number 1. And it is worth, again, pointing out that this is his title defense we're talking about here for Warner. And it's quite a curious case when you consider that for the longest time, for Levi Warner, taking a look throughout his performance at the start of this season, having a quick glance at it here, it has been a rather worrying one because he's eluded the top 10 for quite some time here. He's 19th in the championship, was 32nd in Silverstone, was 5th in Misano, where things really took a positive turn for him. But then in the last round, in the pouring wet conditions at the Red Bull Ring, he dropped down to 24 for the end of that race. So this is, again, part of that ebb and flow. We've seen an extreme here of ups and downs for Warner. This does look to be his first podium of the season, after what we saw in his last top 5 appearance was back in Misano, and what was a great recovery drive for him. Been a case where here on his championship title defense, he has been quite cursed, as it would appear. Let's not say that it's not going to be possible to see that possibly manifest again here. Bear in mind, if these two start pushing and shoving for 2nd, who do they invite in? None other than Angelo Petruzzella. In the number 20. Number 66 then on board here with Matthew Williams in his pursuits. Levi Warner. The 2 Fords go head to head. Meanwhile, we just saw that up in front, Sulev Ladva and Daniel Duda. We'll go to catch on board here with Matthew Williams at this time. Just quickly glancing at Lejevi Harris for one last time here before we cut on board to the fight among the podium sitters. Looking to go and find then the fight of things between the 66 and the 1. We see that they do spill over into lapped traffic here with Daniel Duda and Sulev Ladva in front. On board then with Matthew Williams in the 66 in his fight for 2nd. We see not too far off their trails, in fact, as it appears gaining time slowly but surely, is Angelo Petruzzella. About 1.8 seconds and closing on the twin Fords on their run around turn 7. The time is running out here with lap times crawling in and around the 2-minute mark in amongst traffic at this time. They are looking really only at the scope of 5, maybe at a push 6 laps here before the end of this race. Of course, that's all decided by the race leader, who, as things stand, as these 3 cross just under the bridge there, the 828 of Gianluca Candarella has gone up over that bridge. So he's on the run down through just past the Casio Triangle as we speak. So that really speaks volumes to the distance he's carved out on this field. It looks like a hat-trick of victories are short to follow in the next 10 minutes here for Candarella. As we see here, all-out war for 2nd amongst the remaining cars of the podium. That could very well shortly be joined by Petruzzella. You see there moving over to one side, Manuel Zampa. Now 25th in this race. It is worth pointing that out for the newcomer to the grid by nature of just keeping his head low out of trouble and not finding himself making any mistakes here, Zampa has advanced up quite a fair few positions, was towards the back of the field for the race start and is now 25th. You consider the amount of DNFs in this race, with him not being one among them, it's a story of survival that's carved out his first chapter here in FATCH GT. Or at the very least in Season 10. Out through turn 7 then into the Degners. Still on here with the furthest fight up the order. Second place is battle by 0.3 of a second. And again, addressing the elephant in the room, that Ferrari is closing in on them at a very fast rate of knots now. 1.5 seconds away. The white and orange number 20 of Angelo Petruzzello is soon to join this fight for second place. For Matthew Williams as well, this is a scope of his first podium at stake here. Whether he finishes third or second still marks the first podium of the season for him. For Petruzzello, taking a look further down the order here. Petruzzello, as it stands then, is 21st in the championship. Had 2 down-and-out results in Silverstone and Misano, 29th on both occasions, with this last round at the Red Bull Ring yielding 4th place, where he currently stands on this grid right now with 8.5 minutes left to go. If he can advance up to the podium, that would mark also his first of the season, and I believe his first in FATCH GT. Worth keeping note of that there, as Petruzzello, I believe, was one of several drivers to have joined us here for Season 10, along the likes of Giovanni Ciulla and Gianluca Candarella. Of course, there's been many more names to join for Season 10, but those are 3 among them still on this grid. Around the Degner curves we go then, through turn 9. Warner still yielding better results there on the exit of turn 9 in towards turns 10 and 11. Williams later onto the brakes there to make up for some of that lost distance. And again, worth pointing out, that gap is still shrinking between Williams and Petruzzello, now 1.3 seconds. 7 minutes left to go then. The 828 crosses the line just a moment ago there. That marks that we'll get a roughly 4 more laps of racing here in Suzuka before the session is out. Down through Spoon Curve, turn 13 and turn 14. And again, wrestling the controls of that Mustang. We saw it on a few occasions for Williams over the course of this lap. This is the most recent among them. It is starting to show then the fatigue on those tyres in this race. You see they're running out wide. Goes Levi Warner. This could open the doors up on a chance for second place. Having to hold around at the outside here at the Casio Triangle. It's contact between the 2 Mustangs. Matthew Williams looks to advance on through, but following on through there, the Ferrari of Angelo Petruzzello, now out of turn 18, is hot on the trails here for second place. He's got 1 Mustang under his belt inside of that top 5. There is a very high chance he could have another. Down through turn 1 and 2. Williams moves up to second, but now he's placed on the opposite end of that fight for second place, now defending away from an advancing Petruzzello. Let's go and catch on board if we can here with the Ferrari. Looking around the field to locate him here, on board with Petruzzello as he chases down Williams. We see they're super close to contact, and the 66 goes around, turned around by the number 20, as Angelo Petruzzello is a marked man by the Ford Motor Company after that turnaround. Getting a look at that on the replays if we can then. There's a hook, line and sinker turnaround. We just see the trailing end of it there. I don't believe that 20 intended to put himself on the quarter like that, but it was a case where that's where the nose of the car ended up. That's certainly going to be an interesting investigation at hand here from race control. We see in the live footage to our bottom right, albeit with quite a great deal of desync there, as we just get another look at that spin out, that Warner is hot on the trails here. That number 20, after the 66 was removed from the equation, Matthew Williams drops down to 4th place and is now nearly 10 seconds away from the number 20. A very controversial end to their fight at this time. We saw it was very lively from Petruzzella. Managed to get his way up and around Levi Warner at the Casio triangle after the contact between the 66 and the 1. Now we see the number 1 pressed right up to the back end of Petruzzella. The Ferrari forced to defend as Warner leaps for the inside down at the Casio triangle. And it is a bit of bumping there between the pair. Now out through turn 17 into turn 18. They rub doors. Not particularly pleased with that one is Warner as he falls back in behind to 3rd place, but on the slipstream here on the opening straight is certainly where he could give it another go, and Petruzzella's aware of this, trying to cover him off from the inside, muscles him back to the outside line, down through the first curve at turn 1, now through the second half of it at turn 2, as the Ferrari continues to hold ground here for 2nd place. Up and around turn 3, this was the same site of quite a fair few incidents in this race, and not too far up that order on the run to turn 6. We saw that incident play out between Petruzzella and Williams in the last lap just gone. Too far away, though, to have the same thing happen to him. Petruzzella now 8/10 up over Warner. A very controversial approach to 3rd place. We do see here the arrival of a new fight, McGowan versus Williams. John Williams now joins the fray as Ian McGowan falls down the order. Quite a fair distance there from what's remaining of that top 5 fights. Chris Harris versus Patrick Leger on the exit of turn 8 at the first of the 2 Degners. In terms of the prime fights of this race at the moment, Petruzzella versus Warner for 2nd place, Leger versus Harris for 5th place, and then Williams versus McGowan for 8th place. That's just in the top 10, because a little further behind we also have De Gaulle versus Hatton for 12th place on this grid. And I believe that just about surmises all of the current fights at play here. We do see from John Williams down through to turns 10 and 11, the 923 charging up to the back end of Ian McGowan. But no dice on any moves just yet. And we see here down through to the Casio triangle once again, the number 1 versus the number 20. Behind then, Roll Colmus, having been lapped out past in the 666. He's 21st. 2 minutes left to go in this race here, and so it would stand. We are approaching the final lap just around the corner for Gianluca Candarella. He's currently on the penultimate lap of racing as he rounds turn 12 here on lap 43. With these two on the remainder of the podium having just started the very same lap. Out through turn 2 into turn 3. Watching away from their fight to see some of the others here. We do see things get very close out through 130R between Williams and McGowan for 8th place. Down through the Casio triangle. As it would stand, though, the Ferrari just missing out in the straightaway section there. Slipstream was all they had to stay in the fight with McLaren on the straightaway. The McLaren just ever so slightly faster. You see here Leger versus Harris. This is 5th place up for grabs. As we approach onto the final minute of racing, Candarella crosses the line to start that last lap of racing here in the 828. And he's a country mile up ahead of the rest of that field. His fellow Ferrari then. And part of that trifecta of Italian talent to have joined, all seemingly under the same team here. Sister car, the number 20 of Angelo Petruzzella, marks 2nd place in the absence of the number 10 of Giovanni Ciulla, who it's worth pointing out has since advanced back up into the top 20 in spite of his disconnect earlier on today. We see here, back in with Williams v McGowan. Last interval reported less than 1/10 of a second between the duo as they round turn 11. The Ferrari still pressed up to the back end of that McLaren, but still no advance yet in sight for Williams for 8th. Leger runs wide on turn 14. And that does drop some distance away from Harris who looks to secure on his second appearance through the season here what looks to be very likely the case for Chris Harris of another top 10 appearance, and as it would stand, his first top 5 appearance on record in Season 10. It's worth pointing out number 59 has run into some bother there. That is for Zampa. He's 25th in this race at the moment. Looking here, Williams versus McGowan. And they have one more lap to play with here on the run down to the Casio Triangle, so they get one more shot at this before the session is out. Same story as it stands then for Leger and Harris. Moreover for Warner and Petrutella, but you can see that has quickly fallen by the waist side, as we do see here on the run down towards the line goes that of McGowan and Williams. But catching on board here on the exit of 130R with Gianluca Candarella. Down through the Casio Triangle then on what has been unstoppable form, even more so than ever, raising the bar here in Japan. He won in Misano, he won in Austria, and making his way to the line, Gianluca Candarella wins in Suzuka. A brilliant, brilliant drive there. Unfathomably fast by Candarella. We'll catch on with him towards the end of this lap here. We do see with what remains of the last couple of fights of today, as not far from the line, actually a fair deal from the line, it's worth pointing out here. Petruzella looking at second place. Not if Warner has anything to say of it, but the closer fight's still at play here. McGowan versus Williams and Leger versus Harris. That's all in the top 10 at the moment. We also have, worth pointing out there, Giovanni Chula recently up ahead of Guy Spruce. We'll see if that boils over to anything at the checkered flag. Watching on with some of the remainder of the fights here on track, as we do see approaching the Casio Triangle. This was one fight for the longest time here, Petrutella versus Warner. Certainly one that is going to catch the ire of quite a fair few after the incidents these two have been through over the course of the second half of the race. Nonetheless, though, Angelo Petrutella sees his first podium here in Season 10 as he approaches the line for second. Warner also collecting on his first podium in Season 10, third place for Ford. Williams on a begrudged 4th place. We'll still see a positive result nonetheless in the top 5 for Ford. We see then at the end of this race, it's going to be side by side between Leger and Harris, rolling down towards the line here at the end of round 4. They did go side by side through the Casio Triangle, but who's going to take it in terms of P5? To the line it goes, and it's Harris by 134 thousandths of a second. Jan Villenbos for 7th. We see here for McGowan versus Williams as they go roaring down to the line for 8th place. Here for McGowan. Can he hold on to it against the Ferrari? Rolling down to the line. It's much the same story as we saw for Harris and Leger. To the line, McGowan for 8th. Williams for 9th. Baslier looking at a confident P10 in the number 23. Well, it's been a very exciting end to the race here in Suzuka. Gianluca Candarella collects on a 3rd of his victories. Now a hat-trick for the 828 Ferrari. Baslier to the line there, marks 10th place on the grid. You can see the final results there. Gianluca Candarella wins in Suzuka. Angelo Petrutella in 2nd place. Levi Warner in 3rd. Matthew Williams in 4th. Chris Harris on his first top 5 appearance there marks 5th place. Patrick Leger in a very close 6th place. 134 thousandths. That's the closest margin I believe we have on this grid at the end of the race today. Jan Villenbos in 7th with Ian McGowan 8th. John Williams in 9th. And Niels Baslier we saw to the line there for 10th place in the number 23 Ferrari. Looking at the rest of the grid then, from 11th to 20th, Thomas, De Gaulle, Hatton, Kokimelakis, Bright, Ladver, Peter Sveen, Chula, Bruce and Lane. Then from behind, from 21st to the end of the order at the moment, Hussen, Kolmas, Duda, Rutias, Zampa and Cherry Moore. Then we saw our myriad of DNFs here. Stander, Nagolski, Homoki, Friedman, Surridge, Verstecher, Bleich, Sika, Panabianco and Baloch. A brutal, brutal race here. 10 DNFs here in the first 90-minute race of the season. And at the checkered flag, what has been a fantastic series of fights throughout round 4 has given us another Ferrari 1-2, albeit with the introduction of Angelo Petrutella. Now, that's still one up for debate, given that this will more than definitely, with how things gone over the course of the second half of that race between both Petrutella and Warner in the first half of the race, that's going to go over to the stewards. We'll see exactly what comes out of it and report back for round 5 of the championship. And speaking of round 5, as we peel away from what has been a hat-trick of victories for Candarella here at round 4, taking a look at the road ahead, we're back onto the standard format for the rest of the next couple of weeks, actually. That will comprise the next 5 weeks all the way up until the 18th of May. as we go back on to the 60-minute racing format. Next round then will be at a circuit we've visited quite a fair few times in the last week, 3 times to be precise there. Next week we'll go to the Circuit Zandvoort. Then thereafter, as we enter the second half of the championship, will be Kyalami and Laguna Seca from the 27th of April to the 4th of May. Then the second and last wet race following thereafter at Indianapolis. The penultimate round the week after that at Snetterton. And then we get to visit the 90-minute format once again at the season finale on the 25th of May at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in Stavelot, Belgium. What a race it's been, though, today here in Suzuka. And a great fight throughout for many a driver. And at the checkered flag, yet another bit of silverware to add to the collection of Gianluca Candarella, who has taken competition by storm here in Season 10. I have it on great authority to see this as championship material. He certainly came into this with a very heavy presence as one of a very rare number of drivers on SimGrid to be recognised as Alien, one of the highest, if not the highest ranks that exist in the new tiering system. That is a platinum driver. We are in the presence then of a serious customer to this grid. Do look forward to seeing how things unfold then when we get to round 5 next week at Zandvoort. Until then, though, that's all from us here on TRTN. If you're joining us tomorrow, we get underway with round 2 of the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup tomorrow evening at around 8 o'clock in the evening, I should say, BST. That's all from us here on TRTN, though. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.